After all art is experience.
Hello and welcome to The Company Doctor. Today we're joined by the highly revered Barre instructor Jen Brown, who started her company as a side hustle run from a studio in her garden, and whose classes were quickly hailed by mainstream media as the #1 workouts to do during lockdown. Today she talks to Gary about the importance of persistence, consistency and building habits, and how these qualities transcend the discipline of Barre classes and inform our day-to-day lives. Enjoy the episode, and do visit thecompany.com to subscribe and listen to previous episodes.
Hey Jen, thanks so much for joining The Company Doctor.
Oh, I'm delighted to be here.
Well, we're even more delighted that you're here because the topic today is the inside track to persistency and consistency and a little bit of unconscious good habit. So we thought, who better to have on than Jen Brown?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? I think that consistency is the current kind of buzzword in exercise. So you've timed it quite well. It seems to be everything people are talking about.
It seems to be, and I've got so many questions for you. So what I thought I'd do, my first one is obviously we want to introduce you. So the very first question I wanted to ask you is, tell us a bit about yourself, a quick intro to yourself and what you're up to, what you do. So I think that'd be great.
So my name is Jen and I I'm a Barre instructor. Not many people outside the fitness world really know what Barre is. It's a mixture of Pilates and classical ballet and more traditional strength training moves. I run my company from the studio in my garden, and I've got 4 kids. So it started off as a sideline hustle, really, just something to get me through the days. But when lockdown hit, I put my classes online for my then attending students. And for some mystical reason, the Mail Online picked up my classes and they ran my classes as their #1 workouts to do in lockdown, which was, I mean, very welcome, but completely unexpected at the time. Like I said, I had 4 kids, 2 weren't even in school, 2 were being homeschooled. And I suddenly went from having kind of 300, I don't think I even had 300 Instagram followers, to having a few thousand overnight. And
You went pretty viral, didn't you?
Well,
To be honest.
mean, it's difficult to say that because I think in the Instagram world, we think of being viral as being, hundreds of thousands of followers, whereas I'm still around 20,000. But what it has given me is this online platform that provides a service specifically towards midlife women. So I target women between the age of 35 and pushing up to, I've definitely got clients in their 60s, but generally 35 to 60. And I provide a service for them to make them feel good about themselves. It's a really underutilized part of the market, this idea that you've had your children and then you just shuffle off into the middle distance and you're done. I happen to disagree quite vehemently with that.
And that's what I love about you. You're kind of inspiring, and you can see it at the beginning, because if you go to Jen's website, Meet You at the Bar, Jen is a Barre instructor. She said she's a food enthusiast, she's a woman's advocate, a mental health ambassador, which we're going to dig into, a girl boss you call yourself, and a wife and mother of 4 in your spare time. And yeah. I think it's really interesting because we're gonna get into detail about habits, but people normally don't get into habits because they're too busy. So it'll be interesting to dig into that. And at the end of your website, you say, do Barre, feel amazing, end of story. So you're kind of a no-nonsense kind of person, which I really like. So let me get in. Let me just dig in a bit, because I think I really love people to get to know you.
Let's go.
You kind of introduced Barre a little bit, but for the uninitiated, what the hell is Barre?
So
sorry to ask this.
No, that's absolutely, well, I'm delighted. I'm happy to talk about Barre all day. It, like I said before, it is a mixture of different types of exercise which you fuse together to make. What makes Barre different is that it is low impact, because as we age, as women age, we lose that wonderful, wonderful hormone called estrogen, and our joints start to ache and repetitive injuries come in. So Barre takes very disciplined exercises, but does it without putting the pressure through your joints. So it's all set to music. There's an element of coordination and dance that is required, but can be learnt. I think it's really important to say that I've never had a ballet lesson in my life. And amongst my group of friends, I'm renowned as having like the worst sense of rhythm, always being the one going to the left when everyone else is going right. But it is something that you can learn.
Yeah, it sounds like me.
We'd be a fine pair on the dance floor. So everything is set to music. And it's really the emphasis on, I think it gets you the results that you want, but I don't emphasize the way that we look. It's more to do with the way that it makes you feel. So for me, I find the idea of working to a 21-year-old in hot pants really quite a turn off. And we'll talk about this when we come to consistency and building habits. The idea of doing something with someone who makes you intrinsically feel bad about yourself is very unappealing. So I try to make my classes feel like I'm in the room with you and that I am your greatest cheerleader, because I believe that things are much easier to stick to if you enjoy them. And if you don't feel intimidated, you want to make things as easy as possible for yourself. And part of that is feeling good about yourself, because no one comes back to things that make them feel bad about themselves.
No, I bet you're really good at it. And we're going to talk about it a bit later, because you've managed to get a superpower, maybe unintentionally, I don't know. And it actually said it in the article, I think it was in the Telegraph or the Mail, one of those. It said she can see you and she can see your comments, but it feels like you're socially interactive when actually you're not live online, are you?
No, I have to pre-record all my classes.
Yeah, because you're busy, right? But you interact with people as if they're there.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
I don't find that difficult, because barre is a practice as opposed to, you could never master barre. So with every track that I'm recording, I'll feel my posture starting to slip, or, it will really, really burn. And I just have a conversation in the same way that I would be talking to myself in the mirror. I'm like, oh, okay, so you're going to need to pull your shoulders back and down. You're going to need to turn your hips, because I can feel my own form starting to go. So I figure if my form's starting to go, then someone who's not as experienced as me will be having the same issues. And then, I like people. I want people to think that they would like to meet me. So I just chat to them, because there's nothing to me more of a turn-off than, I'm going to be very generalist here, but those kind of American instructors who talk almost like robots. There's no personality or spark coming from them. It is a very automated, go girls, it makes me cringe. Yeah, it makes me cringe. So I'm working on the assumption that if I feel like that, lots of other people feel like that.
But it makes you very relatable, and I've seen you in action before, and people feel like they know you really well, and I guess they don't. But you're very relatable. So let's get into the topic a little bit. When I asked you to join us as a guest, and thankfully you said yes, because it was this time of year, and actually went down the old, I guess, why don't we talk about exercise? And you said to me, you're really keen to talk about consistency and habit building. Why was that, out of interest?
Well, I think that, like I said, it is the kind of current buzzword in the exercise, but I think, like all these things, it's in danger of being misunderstood. There comes a point when consistency is actually counterproductive, and no one really seems to be talking about that. The idea that in order to be successful, you need to be consistent. Well, what if you're not feeling very well? What if you haven't slept very well the night before? What if, there are so many spanners that go into the kind of rich tapestry of life, that I think, with the emphasis on consistency being what it is, that if you get thrown off track, then you feel like you failed. And that's where the persistence bit comes in. The persistence is how quickly you return to your commitment. So the consistency is the habit. Everybody knows that life gets in the way. And I think with this real focus on consistency, it's dangerous. You feel that if you haven't gone to the gym 4 times a week or whatever your goal is, that you've failed. And then you're really likely to get knocked off track by that fear of failure, that feeling that, well, it's not perfect, I'm done. And that's where you need the persistence. You need the acceptance that, with the best will in the world, we never know what's around the corner, but the persistence is how. So the consistency, I think what I'm saying, isn't determined by perfection. It's the persistency that brings you back to it.
Well, I think it's really interesting, because normally at this time of year, the new year brings out the kind of resolution brigade, doesn't it? They start in the gym in February and retire in March. What's your experience, and how do you maintain that, persistence when you're in the real world as you described? Things happen, right? How do you maintain it?
I mean, it's quite easy for me, isn't it? Because I get paid to be persistent, which always helps.
It's a motivation of some sort.
Yeah, it is. It is, obviously. It's. But I think when people set their New Year's resolutions or their goals, what they don't do is really think it through. I think people are like, right, I want to get fitter. I want to be healthier. I'm going to go to the gym 7 times a week from being a non-exerciser. And the place where you really have to start is looking for your why. What is it that is driving that goal? So in the olden days, when I had actual personal training clients, we would always start with like a really in-depth visualization technique. And I did this for me actually when I was thinking about the podcast. I sat down and I was like, right, I'm 44, I think. And my current obsession is this idea that everybody's focused on longevity, but what we're not really looking at is the quality of the length of life. So I want my life to be as long as possible, but to be in really good health for as long as possible. I'm not particularly interested in living in really bad health. I've got a slightly older dad who, his health is grim and it is affecting his quality of life an awful lot. So for me, that's going to be my why. That's my motivator. I want to live really well because there's no denying that the second half of my life is opening up quite quickly before me. So I think it helps when it comes to making a choice, like, can I really be bothered to go for that run or make a healthy meal as opposed to ringing for a takeaway? It's really handy having that very clear vision. So when you're making a choice about whether or not to do the healthy habit, you know why you're going to choose not to do it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And it comes up another question related to it, and maybe you can just put that in. You're talking about the why being the motivation. I think it'd be useful to explain to people about that, because if the habit is it built on motivation, or is it built on conditioning yourself, or is it kind of both?
I think it's probably both. So what I used to do is I'd think of it like a hierarchy. So you have your main overarching goal. And for me, I'm kind of work the opposite of SMART goals. I think it's really nice to have quite a vague overarching goal. So I want to live well for longer, or I want to be healthier. I want to get fitter. But you know why? I want to get fitter because my BMI is too high. My doctors told me that I've got bad blood pressure, and in the future, this is going to affect the way that I live. So you're clear on your overarching vaguish goal, but you know why you're setting that goal. Then, kind of the mid-tier, you'd break it down into steps in what you need to do in order to achieve this. So say your goal is that you want to be healthier. And I can't really think of anyone that wouldn't want that goal. I mean, it's hard to imagine saying to someone, would you like to be healthier? No, I'd really like to be more unhealthy.
They might not think it's an important thing for them to worry about, I guess, at some point, because they probably think they're okay.
Absolutely not. But I think even if you weren't worried about it, you'd still instinctively say it. I can't see a downside to being healthier. So within that, you want to think about what steps you need to take in order to achieve it. So you probably want to eat better, you want to move a bit more, maybe drink more water, focus on having healthy sleep patterns, manage your stress levels. Those, again, quite broad goals, but you can see the different things that feed into the overarching goal. And then this is where the consistency bit comes in. Within those goals, you need to create those actionable habits. So if we take eating better as one of your actionable goals, you're going to say, I need to eat more protein. I need to eat a wider variety of foods. I'm going to try not to eat whilst I'm watching TV or scrolling through my phone. Maybe I'll think about not snacking in between meals. So you've got all these kind of sub habits that you want to create. But what I really like about this is that every action you're taking, then becomes a vote for the kind of person you want to be. So it doesn't matter. It's that what I'm trying to say, probably not that clearly, is that you're trying to shift away from that all or nothing mindset where you're like, right, I haven't done it well, I failed. So you're going to say an avoidance goal would be, I'm going to cut out sugar. Whereas the goals that I find better for people to set are approach goals. So I'm going to try and add in more vegetables. I'm going to try and eat more protein. You're adding things in rather than taking them away. And each time you do that, it's a win. So, you might have a day where you eat more protein, but you have a chocolate bar and, pudding, but you also drank lots of water. So your confidence building, you're not saying, right, I've done something, I failed, I've fallen off the wagon, it's all over. Each tiny micro step that you take is a win. And if you're doing some things better than you were before, you're still making progress.
Yeah, that's good. That's good advice. I mean, but one thing that's interesting, Jen, because my wife does your classes and I can see her commitment to it. So I get the motivation bit and the why for getting started. The bit I'm interested to know, and for people listening, I think it'd be really helpful, is how the hell do you maintain that? How do you maintain that motivation of that why?
I mean, if you could bottle it, you and I, Gary, would be sailing off into the Bahamas forevermore.
I think you do bottle it, Jen. I think you have bottled it.
I think my main takeaway from everything I've learned over the years is that we overestimate how much can be achieved in a small amount of time. And everybody underestimates how much small changes applied, and there's that word, consistently over a longer period of time can achieve. So for me, it's all about those little tweaks. So if you look at building habits, the science suggests there are lots of things that go into making successful habits. Now, there will be uber athletes who apply all of these techniques. But for me, I've probably got 3 or 4 of them down pat out of the group of, I think I've got probably about 8 to talk to you about. And you just choose the ones that work for you. But, the science of habit building is difficult because at the moment there's a big argument going on about how long it takes to create a habit. And at the moment, people are saying it's 66 days. Now, if you said to me, right, it's going to take you 66 days, I'd be like, I've got to do it every day, 66 days. I mean, why would you even start, right? Or 21 days or 30 days. Everybody's different. It takes everybody a different amount of time to build a habit, and it will certainly depend on the habit. And that's why having that big overarching goal is really useful, because you're moving towards it from lots of different directions and you're making progress in incremental stages, but you're still further along than you were last week or the month before, even if you haven't taken huge, giant strides.
What you're saying, though, is the consistency bit, whatever the number of days is, the more you're consistent, the more chance it will become a habit, by the sound of it.
Yeah, very much.
If you start and stop, it doesn't necessarily work so much.
Yeah, there's a brilliant quote, which really, if only I'd ever said it first. Consistent, imperfect action beats waiting until things are perfect to take action every single time.
Love that.
You do something not brilliantly, it is so much better than not doing it at all. So if you look at successful habit building, I mean, the one that I always put at the top, because for me, it's how I run my life, basically, because, things get in the way. So for me, I always try and create the path of least resistance. I try to set myself up for success. So, for instance, if you're wanting to start an exercise routine, in order to be successful, you want to make it really easy for yourself. So you get up in your workout clothes. That removes the obstacle of, oh, I'm already dressed, I've done my makeup, I haven't got time to go home and change, whatever it is. You've ring-fenced the time in your diary. I think that's a really important thing. You make that time yours and it's blocked out. So it's like any other important meeting, unmissable event that you've got going on. You set reminders on your phone. This one for me is really useful. I don't shower until I've worked out because I know I need to have a shower.
Wow.
And so I'm like,
and you have a ring around you.
Yeah, I've got to work out. before I can shower. Therefore, I am going to do the work. And I think something that ties in really closely to the setting yourself up for success. And this is the piece of advice that I always give anyone who gets in contact with me saying, I really want to start Barre, but I don't know how to start. You've got to be honest with yourself. People who don't exercise at all and then maybe go to the gym or meet a personal trainer and they're like, right, you're going to work out 5 times a week. And on your 2 off days, you can do some cardio. And they're like, yeah, let's go. And 3 weeks in, it's just not sustainable. So I think it's really sensible to start with something you can imagine committing to forever. So be that 1 exercise class or 2 exercise classes, it's small and it's achievable. And you bed that in first, going back to that point that you're still doing more than you were doing before. So it is a win. Even if it is 1 10-minute stretch a week, that is still better for you than where you were before. And once you've got that bedded in and you see the benefit of it, then you add in the next one. So you work up in increments. Anybody who comes to me and says, I'm starting your classes, Jen, I'm going to take all 4 classes a week and I'm going to do it every week for a year. I know that I'll see their attendance be really high. It's not that their intention is there. Their attendance will be really, really high, but human nature doesn't work. That all or nothing mentality. When you fall off the wagon, you're like, I'm going to give up then. It's just the way that we work.
It conjures up a question for me, though. So most people make, with this in mind, right? Most people make the excuse about not having enough time. I know that you're a mum of 4. I've seen you in action. I mean, I don't know how you do anything. You've got so much in your life going on. So you have an incredibly busy life. Does being busy create habits, or do habits make you busy? For people that think they're too busy to do stuff.
Yeah, I mean, but I also think it's really untrue that, when you see those awful kind of motivational quotes, everyone's got the same 24 hours in a day. They really don't. I have got 4 kids, but I've also got a nanny. And, for anyone who doesn't have a nanny and is trying to fit in exercise and still has a child at home, that looks very, very different to me, and obviously it's easy to be facetious and be like, well, if I didn't have a nanny, I wouldn't be able to work. Because I wouldn't, because my littlest still isn't at school. One day. But I do think, I'm going slightly off topic here, but I don't think that mums prioritise themselves enough. I know that I'm pretty unbearable if I don't exercise a certain amount each week. I just know my mental health goes, I'm ratty, I'm grumpy, I'm cross with myself, I'm cross with everyone around me. And, I'm lucky I've got a really supportive husband who's like, please go to the gym. Please go to the gym. We all know what it is that makes us tick. And that, again, I think comes into the motivation thing and the being consistent, being able to be consistent is find something you enjoy doing. If you hate being cold, don't think that you're going to take up running in January. It's so obvious when you think about it.
Common sense isn't very common, apparently.
Yeah, but if you don't think about it, you're like, I must go running. It's really efficient. It's something I can do really easily, And I think that's something that puts people off Barre until they try it. Is they're like, oh, I wouldn't enjoy that. It's set to music, and it's. I just think I'd find, I'd rather do something that I know. I think in order to find things that you enjoy, you have to try lots of different things, and be open to being surprised by enjoying something.
I actually enjoyed that. That was amazing.
Yeah,
agreed. I've seen her from personal experience, I've seen my wife, she's got into a routine. She loves it. She looks forward to it, and she won't miss it. And I think that's why I'm trying to get underneath for people listening to understand that you've created a habit and it's a good one. Can we just switch tracks a second? Because I know that you're mental health is a massively important thing to you. Could you share your thoughts on how people can tackle this through some form of physical exercise or physical activity, and your linkage to kind of mental health and some of the things you're doing? So I know you've got it on your website as a kind of a key mission of your why.
I think a lot of my life has been shaped by my mental health. I, was swanning along and everything was fantastic. And then I had my first child and I was hospitalized about 6 weeks. Well, in fact, I know exactly 6 weeks after he was born with a type of postnatal depression, which I think it's the lucky 5% of postnatal depression gets diagnosed as this. And it was really shocking. And it took me a year to even be able to think about my baby pretty much. The rest of the time, I was mainly just focused on the physical symptoms. I felt like someone had stuck my fingers into an electric socket, and there was just this, my whole body was shaking all the time, and I was really lucky. I had a very, very supportive mum, and we had the financial resources to get me the help that I needed. And I really was. I've got no doubt at all in my mind that I would have ended up dead. None at all. If I hadn't have got that help. And then I had my second child. Lo and behold, the same thing happened again. So it turns out now I'm much more educated and I know what the problem so-called is. And it's happened with each subsequent child. I manage it better. I am medicated throughout my pregnancies, but it has really informed who I have become. And then, of course, I hit early menopause or perimenopause, and the whole cycle started up again because mine is very hormonally related for me. So to me, the idea that there are women out there suffering in the way that I suffered without a supportive family or the financial backup to help them is genuinely horrifying, because with the best will in the world, and I do not mean to be contentious, but the NHS is super, super stretched. And if you need the kind of help that I needed, I needed it then and there. It couldn't have waited 3 weeks or a month.
Yeah.
And one of the things that kind of led me back to being myself, and I cannot replace medication, I cannot replace talking therapies, but one of the things that did lead me back to myself was exercise. And that's when I retrained as a personal trainer and became a pre and postnatal specialist. So I spent about 8 years working with pregnant women and women in their postnatal period, motivated largely by that mental health aspect. I think what exercise gives you is it gives you space to be yourself. You're not responsible to anyone else in that time. And, the endorphins undoubtedly help. There's a reason that people feel great after exercise. It's because we release endorphins.
Yeah.
But for me specifically, Barre is really the best form of exercise I found, because you have to concentrate so hard on what I'm saying and being in the music that it becomes very meditative. You're really in the present and it takes you out of your own head for that amount of time. Now, lots of people get that from yoga, but it's just been the way that it's worked for me, that this is my thing. And I'm so lucky with the women who come to my classes online, as we've got this really great community and they message me all the time. And I hear more about what it does for their mental health than what it does for their physical attributes. I'd say probably by a tune of about 8-2. It really is the thing.
That's a lot.
And considering Barre does do all the kind of toning and lifting and all the things that you want, but
mental health is kind of risen above by the sound of it.
Well, and I think midlife is a really hard time for women, getting their heads around the next phase and, all the things happening to their bodies and maybe the lack of confidence as we start to age and society deeming us as unattractive. It's a tough age, I think, for many women.
It is, but what stands out for me, and what you've told me, and thank you for sharing it, it's obviously quite a personal story, is, your mission's about revolutionise the way midlife women feel about themselves, their bodies and their life stage. And you've really kind of brought it to life. And I've seen that, personally with, say, my wife is involved in your classes and really gets a lot out of it. So let's look, we've got a little bit of time left. I've got time for 2 more questions, and then I want to get to your musical taste. So if you wouldn't mind, just trying to thread it all back together. If you're looking back and reflecting on, you've seen a lot of people succeed or struggle with building the consistency in habits through Barre. What are the key things? If you could give, let's say, the top 3 things that people should consider that really make the difference, what would they be? And that's a hard question, but what the hell, eh?
It would definitely be meet yourself where you're at, start small, what is realistic. It would definitely be set yourself up for success, create the path of least resistance, make it as easy as possible. And then the third thing is know that it's going to go off track, accept that it isn't, you're not going to be perfect, but what you want is the persistence to return to it, even when it hasn't gone your way. Maybe the kids are sick, they're off school, the sickness comes through your house, you can't work out for 4 or 5 weeks even sometimes, it can get quite gritty. But just know that you're going to come back and you're going to keep coming back every time you get knocked off track.
Yeah, that's good. They're good 3 things. Thank you for that. And kind of one last question. You've seen a lot of people come and go, I guess, through your, and stay, obviously. But looking back at this and knowing what you know now, for people that people that are listening are thinking about either doing the bar or just doing something where it gives them a bit of purpose and consistency for whatever their goals are. It's a bit of a sort of a leading question, but is it really worth the effort? Genuinely, because you've seen people, all sorts of people, right?
Yeah, I have. And, it isn't for everybody, bar, astonishingly. Can't understand that at all. But, I think that, Gary, is kind of how we were talking about that big overarching goal. Is it really worth it? Of course it is, because we all want to live as well as we can for as long as we can. And there's no way that anybody can deny the healthier you are, the more of a chance you stand of living well for longer.
Yeah. And with that in mind, because it's good for people, again, it doesn't matter if it's bar or something else, it doesn't matter, but the same principle. How do you get people to that place where they get to really understand that they're missing out by not doing something like that? I mean, everyone has their different goals and things they're focused on.
Of course.
And it may be bar, it may not be bar, but how do you get the message across, to a friend or to someone that you think, they're missing out?
I mean, I think it's easier once they're in and that habit is ingrained enough that they feel it when they don't do it, then it's a very easy argument to have. Then it's, do you feel better afterwards? Every single time, without a shadow of a doubt. Yeah, I do. Oh, okay. And that's what always, if I'm really tired or, grumpy or whatever, I'm like, I know I'm going to feel better. So that works once you've got the habit. Converting people who hate exercise is always going to be that uphill struggle. And that's where I say, right, even if you just do 10 minutes, it's 10 minutes more than you were doing last week. So let's take that 10 minutes and then, and it might take 6 months to build something that looks like an exercise plan, where they might go 3 times a week, which lots of people regard that as, it's all right, isn't it? But to that particular person who's never exercised before, that is a massive, huge achievement and needs to be celebrated as such. So it's meeting yourself where you're at.
Brilliant. Such good advice. So listen, we've come to the end of time. I'm just going to ask you in a second about your musical taste, but before we do, I'd like to thank you so much. You're truly inspirational. I've seen you in action. You have an amazing charisma about you. You managed to connect to people in a way that people almost feel they have a personal relationship and they've never met you. So your interaction online is incredible. It's amazing. And I can say that personally. My wife has been through all the lockdown classes and is still a big fan and still working hard. So thank you so much for joining us on this episode. Hopefully people have got a few tips that make the difference in their lives, and your focus is incredible. So let's move to your musical taste as we finish off today. We for some reason decided to get our guest to share maybe some inspirational music, which again is a big thing in your life, I know, and get a couple of tracks. And we've got a Spotify playlist called the Company Doctor playlist strangely on Spotify.
My music taste is wide and varied.
Well, Let me just tell you that a few episodes ago, we got someone recommended the Ukrainian national anthem for obvious reasons. So we've got a whole bunch of stuff, and it doesn't matter how varied it is, but let us have it.
Okay, well, I went with 2 bar tunes. The first one is by Shanice, and it's called I Love Your Smile, because that really was the first track that I did. Someone else, an absolute goddess called Colleen Fries, she had choreographed it, and it was the first track that I learned that I just thought, wow, this is the way forward. This is what I love. And then the second track is a Whitney Houston, I Want to Dance with Somebody, for all of the reasons, and it's my favourite warm-up track of all time.
Love it. I thought you were going to say, you did a class that was all Beyonce. I thought you were going to go Beyonce.
Beyonce, I did a few themed classes, yeah.
I thought you were going to say Beyonce, but Whitney Houston, love it. Thank you so much, Jen. That was really good. I think you're really going to help a lot of people. So thanks for being with us.
Oh, I've loved it.
Looking forward to hearing the episode, and thanks again.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks, Gary, very much.
A huge thank you to Jen for joining us on this episode. To find out more about Jen and her company Meet You at the Bar, visit meetyouatthebar.com or look her up on Instagram on @meetyouatthebar. Thanks to you all for listening, and we'll see you next time.